Well, hello everyone. This is Don Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Nature's Best. And today I want to talk to you about telephotos and using telephotos specifically in landscape. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you kindly, if you're liking the content on this site, if you could hit the red subscribe button down below. That's the way when we put out a new video, you will be notified and be one of the first to see it. And we plan a lot of content coming out over the next year or so. So please hit that. Also, if you could go to my website, and I'll leave the link down below, and it's www.donsmithphotography.com. And I have a lot of things there on the homepage. You'll see a lot of links on the left for anywhere from books to portfolios to images you can purchase, to my new landscape processing course and my workshops. And I've slowing down on the workshops a little to put my attention into getting this YouTube channel really up to snuff and in good shape for you guys so I can share all this content. Okay, let's dive back in and start talking about telephotos and landscape. This first picture really comes with a story. This was captured on a cold spring morning up in Yosemite on a workshop I was co-teaching with Gary Hart. It was his workshop, so I wasn't really co-teaching it. I was assisting him. But as we were up there, a friend of mine who was very proficient with the photographer's ephemera sent me a screenshot saying, do you know that this crescent moon is going to rise right between El Capitan, that's the silhouette form on the left, and Half Dome, and that's the silhouette form on the right, on this certain morning at this time. Gary back then, and I think he still does, plots with a topo map and some convoluted math that I don't understand. And he went and double checked and said, I think this is going to happen. So we grabbed the group, went up at Old Dark 100, got them into position. And right about the first just brightening of dawn light, here comes this crescent moon from camera left behind El Capitan. And the thing that almost ruined the shoot for me is I had my image stabilizer on. This was back in the day when if you had it on a long lens, this was a 300 millimeter f4, I believe I was still shooting Canon back then, that it would actually jerk the lens and it would make the image blurred. And I forgot I had it on and did the whole shoot through this as the moon came through, and then realized my mistake and went, oh my gosh, and started chimping as madly as I could. And somehow when I got to the frames where the moon was coming through, the gap, everything was sharp. Don't ask me how. A higher power is the only thing I can attribute it to. I really had an angel riding on my shoulder that morning. Thankfully, the new camera's out nowadays, and I know for sure with the Sony, doesn't matter if you have it in image stabilizer or not, because the lens communicates with the camera, and it won't go into that kind of where it will jerk and throw that moon out of focus. So that's my first example, and I would really say that one of the main reasons of shooting with a telephoto is you want to shoot something interesting at a distance that you want to draw attention to. Here's another scene also captured in Yosemite up on Tioga Pass. That's Half Dome, or excuse me, Quarter Dome on the right with this lone pine, and that's Half Dome that's lit up by warm sunset light. And I believe I used about a 400 mil lens here to put the two together. This actually includes some other things I'm going to talk about, shooting, from shadow to highlight and compression, and was just really pleased with how this image turned out. This was another one on a workshop I used to teach up in Bryce Canyon back in the day, and I knew that about 45 minutes past sunset that the light would come in behind these foreground hoodoos in this location I took my group to, and kind of paint the back hoodoos in the center there, and it just made it look stage lit, and gave a really incredible look. This I shot with about, I want to say, a 500 mil lens, somewhere in there. It was a 100-400 with a 1.4x converter. Also, let's talk a little bit about using shadow to highlight and guiding your viewer's eye. This is a frame captured in when Ron Madra and I were teaching our Patagonia workshop. And this is in El Chaltén, Argentina, of the famous Mount Fitzroy. And like two dummies, we went out there to do the scout, and before we started actually teaching the workshops, and we got this out, no problem. And then we started talking to other instructors, and they were blown away that we were getting this. In fact, one instructor told me he had taken his group out 7 mornings in a row to catch this light and never got it. And the reason being is behind Mount Fitzroy resides one of the world's largest glaciers, and it creates its own weather. So most of the time, Fitzroy in this range is under a band of clouds, and you know, can't be seen. So this is sunrise light. I'm happy to say that all the workshops we ever did out in Patagonia, we had one good morning where we had Fitzroy out, and we only had 2 mornings to play with, and we would always get it. So that was pretty cool. We were definitely living right. Another thing to talk about is layers, and we want to get layers, and here we definitely have layers. This was in Torres del Paine in Argentina, excuse me, Chile, and once again in the Patagonia region. And this is sunset light, and you know, when the light started to come on those peaks and that cloud lit up, I just made sure I got in a position where I could get some foreground elements to create a sense of depth and just really isolate my viewer's eye in on those foregrounds, slopes, if you want to call them that, the spires in the background, and the clouds. This is one near where I used to live in South Santa Clara Valley in California. A lot of times, and I still do this, I love to get out at either sunrise or sunset and just drive around and chase some light. And this was a sunset. I was driving down this old country road, and I happened to come across this barn with these beautiful oaks, and then the mountain range rising. This is the Diablo mountain range right behind it. And you can see how far the shadow line had worked itself up that mountain. And just a little bit left of sunset, and I got set up with, I want to say this was about a 200 to 250 lens, somewhere right in there. It was my 100-400, but that was about the focal range of this. And it just had so many layers and textures and colors, from the foreground grasses to the barn to the trees and the mountain and the warm light of the sunset up to the sky. Really, really loved this photograph. This is one that was captured on a rainy morning in Scotland on the Isle of Skye when Ron and I were teaching our workshop there. And it was good it was raining, because it kept people, this is a high tourist area, and it's very hard to capture the scene without a bunch of tourists on the bridge. And you can see the clouds in the background are creating you know, a sense of mood and mystery, and I love it when that happens. So just really, really love this scene. This was on a morning in Iceland, right as dawn light was first starting to come, and we were just about ready to leave and take the group out to another location. And I spotted this from the back parking lot right behind the van, and hopped out really quick with a 300 lens, handheld, and I just grabbed about 3 frames of this and hopped back in, and off we went. And we even offered, does anybody in the van want to shoot this? And everybody kind of wrinkled their nose and said, no, let's go off. I think we were going to Diamond Beach that morning or somewhere. Maybe we were going to an ice cave, which was probably more like it. But another example of compression. And compression will make your moons and your suns look even bigger than they are. Okay, another thing when using telephotos is similar to wide angle. Think about what's in my foreground. This was shot during a sunrise shoot in Te Anau, New Zealand, where I will be heading off shortly with Gary Hart to teach this year's version of our winter time in New Zealand. And we had our backs actually turned to these mule deer, and our driver, Steve Norris, called out just as these clouds were lighting and happened to direct our attention. And I got my wide angle lens off. I think I had a 24-105 on, and I switched to a 100-400 and just moved the mule deer down to the bottom of the frame and compressed them with this sky that was slightly soft focus, but it was all about the light, lighting the underbelly of those clouds. This is another one that kind of works on the same principle. A lot of things we've been talking about. There's the foreground ridges. What I did here is I went to a long shutter speed. I used a 5-stop ND to get some motion in that fog. And then the top is just a dusk sky. And as you're looking at that mountain in the far distance, down to the left ridge of that mountain would be Santa Cruz, California. To the right portion of that sloping ridge would be San Jose, California, to give you some sense of where I'm looking. And this is just a summertime shot with a low fog deck. I think it was at about 30 seconds. I needed a steady tripod, which we're going to be talking about, but I'll mention it now. When you have telephotos, you want a steady tripod, so there's absolutely no vibration. Those ridge lines and those mountains in the background had to be sharp. Here's another great example of compression. This was through a workshop I taught out in White Sands, and that's a yucca plant in the foreground there, and I compressed a rising moon, which was calculated using the photographer's ephemeris. Go back and check out my last couple of videos, and you can figure out how to do this. I use it all the time to compute my moons and my suns, and it's just a great tool and gives you a whole step up, multiple steps up in your knowledge base to create beautiful pictures. So this was compressed, shot at f/16, and happened to have some color even up in those clouds. With telephotos, I want to talk about, we talked a little bit about shadow and highlight, but you need to be moving your viewer's eye, and another way to move your viewer's eye is through lines. And here is this is in a national park in Namibia, and I apologize, I'm blanking on the name of the national park. Very famous sand dune that just goes really, really high up. And this was shot with a 100-400. And I did a lot of different takes on this scene, but it's just to give you an idea. Again, I have a foreground element, but then it's all about that line taking the viewer's eye up and through this frame. I want to talk about shutter speeds also. The more telephoto you start to shoot, the more accentuated your action becomes, thus the faster shutter speed you need. And I hope that all makes sense. I learned this lesson when I used to shoot football. If I had a running back running right at me, if he was starting on the 40-yard line, I could probably freeze that guy down at 1/500th of a second. But by the time he got into the 10-yard line or almost scoring a touchdown, I'm shooting numbers up, and I would need to be a lot faster than 1/500th to freeze that person. So same principle applied here. I was shooting waves, motor driving through them. You can tell I'm old school motor drive, just a lot of shutter frames. This was with my A7R5, so it was 30 frames a second, I believe, and just shot thousands of frames at night, not at night, excuse me, as the sun was low. And it was kind of 3/4 lighting these waves, sort of from the back, not directly backlit, and that's what was giving the warm rim light on these waves, but I just loved the way this wave was breaking and how it was captured. Another thing that helps you move your viewer's eye around is shadow and highlight. This is another illustration of that. This was a scene I didn't set out to capture in Yosemite. I was actually looking 90 degrees to the left of this over the Merced River with a 24-70, but this light started to happen, so I threw my 100-400 on and just captured this scene of, I believe those are birch. I'm not 100% sure I don't believe they're cottonwood, even though they're along the river. But then these 3 pines just happened to light up, a nice little triangular effect. And the barren trees were also creating an opposite triangular effect. So a lot of movement to move my viewer's eye through this frame. And this one is a scene that I captured up in Grand Canyon National Park on a monsoon workshop I used to teach with Gary Hart, a co-taught workshop that I have since dropped off of, and I think Gary still teaches this. If you're interested, check him out. And this is not a pano crop. I just opted to leave what was below, which was the rim of the canyon and below, and then what's above, which was the dark storm clouds. And this was just as the sun was setting, or it might have just set and was lighting up this open band. And I had a lightning trigger on, and it's actually called the lightning trigger from Stepping Stone Productions. It's really the only lightning trigger I highly recommend. We would have other clients bring different lightning triggers and they would miss shots like this. It's about 90+% accurate from cloud to ground strikes, what this is, and probably 75% accurate on intercloud strikes. So it's the lightning trigger. It runs around in the 500 range, and get a hold of them, they'll custom build one for you. This is another illustration of compression. This is Lone Pine Peak up in the Eastern Sierra, Alabama hills. This is behind the town of Lone Pine. And a lot of people confuse this with Mount Whitney because it looks taller than Mount Whitney. And the reason is Mount Whitney is to the right of this peak, and it sits 14 miles back. So it gives the illusion that it's smaller, but Mount Whitney is the higher of the two peaks. And just with, this was during a breaking storm, and just to have this element of mist and clouds, and I wanted to compress these two ridge lines of Lone Pine Peak here. So this was shot with a 400 mil. Now this one is up in Pinnacles National Monument, that is now Pinnacles National Park, but when I shot this it was still the monument. And this was shot with a 400-2.8 Sony with a 2x converter. And I knew this was 2 days before the full moon. You can see it's not quite full, but I needed to be 2 days prior to get this moon to come up and over these peaks when we still had a little bit of warm sunlight on the peaks in the foreground there. This was captured from the west side of the park. There is an east and west side. Sadly, there is no road connecting the two sides of the park. You either come down through the Bay Area and then down into Hollister Highway 25 and out to the Pinnacles. That's the east side. To get to this side, I went down 101 south of Salinas, California to Soledad, and then went up 146 and shot this from where the road ends in the parking lot. But I was really excited to have captured this image. I want to talk about another thing with shooting telephotos, and that is a phenomenon in nature called air light. That simply means when we view a scene, a lot of times what we'll see is the foreground elements in a telephoto will look more contrasty than the further distant objects. And that's because there's particles and some pollution or moisture or anything that can be in the air kind of diffusing the light. And when we put a big telephoto on and compress all of that, it gives this illusion that each concentric ridgeline gets less and less contrasty. I still apply that same principle to even when I'm working with a wide-angle lens. There are certain things like in the Tony Kuiper TK9 called a depth map. That's used in conjunction with Photoshop neural filters. It's really cool. And yeah, so you can apply this principle, but be aware of it as you go out in nature and look. The next time you're in a scene and you're looking way out in the distance, if things just don't look a little less contrasty to your eye. That's what air light is all about. This is a scene I captured with about a 200 mil. I decided this is on the Big Sur coast, that's Point Sur Light Station. And we just had, when I pulled up, most of this was enveloped in fog, but then I could see it was starting to break and it would move in and out. And the color just wasn't moving me, so I popped on my Sony A7 III, no, see, I think it's just an A7 that I had converted to 720 nanometer infrared, where it gives this dramatic black and white look, and I knew I had it when I started capturing these frames, that this just lent itself to being shot in dramatic black and white form. So not much. It was probably about 200 lens to capture this. Here's another example of compression out in White Sands National. Now it's a national park. When I shot this, it was a national monument. I used to run workshops out there also. That's just some yucca plants in the front. I knew where the sun was going to be. This was setting sun, which is easy to predict. And fortunately, that cloud bank didn't settle down on the mountain range back there. And shot at f/16, I couldn't quite hold the mountain range razor sharp, nor the little foreground sticks there. But focused just beyond the yucca and then used depth of field to make sure I had the foreground sharp and as much of the sun sharp as possible. Another example of compression, this is in Namibia, and we were wandering around this park. We were actually going to spend the night with our workshop group there. This was a workshop that I led with Pierre Steenberg and Henning de Beer back in the day. And I had spotted these two rocks during when there was sunshine still out. That's a setting sun. And then it just started emanating these crepuscular rays as it got down onto that kind of mountainy, rocky ridge line back there. And, you know, again, I talk about a higher power. I just really, sorry, that's my beliefs. And I just believe that sometimes the good Lord wants me to be there and photograph this. And I just can't replicate this stuff or explain why it happens when I'm out there. So I just think it's meant for me to be seen and captured. This is ultimate form of compression. This was Grand Canyon National Park. This was kind of the first dawn light that was coming. This was shot with, I believe it was with my 200 to 600 with a 2x converter, so that's 1200. Shooting across a ridge, and you can see how big it's made that sun look. And so again, telephotos, the more telephoto you get, the bigger the moon or the sun will look, and especially if you got it on the horizon. It's called the Ponzo illusion, and if you don't know what that means, you can go ahead and Google it, Ponzo, and that just means that elements like the moon and the sun tend to look bigger when they're on a horizon and we have something to put with them with scale. And I remember having a workshop person wanted to take a workshop from me, and she contacted me and said, is this going to be a full moon? And I said, yes, it is. And is it, how big is the moon going to be? And I said, well, it's all going to depend on what lens you use. And so she said, well, is it a supermoon? And I said, well, really, again, it's going to depend. It's not a supermoon, but if you look up the definition of a supermoon, it's about in circumference 14% bigger is all. And so I said, that's no different than really if I laid a nickel on top of a quarter. Again, it has to do with your millimeter. That's going to either make it look bigger or not. And she ended up not believing me and didn't take the workshop, but we sold it out anyway. Another one from the Grand Canyon with the lightning trigger. Same principles as applied as that other one that I showed you. And this may have been actually during the same storm. It was when the sun was up. That first one I showed you is this. So you can see, the other one I showed you is when the sun had gone down. So you can see there's a little more detail in the canyon wall and a little more detail in those clouds up there. This one I just created back in December. It's one that I've had in my mind for the last couple of years. This is a light station that's Point Pedros Blancos. It's up by it's north of Hearst Castle, just north of up where the elephant seals are, if you're familiar with the area, up off of Highway 1 on the southern end of the Big Sur coast. And I just needed to wait until I got kind of a semi-clear night with some clouds, as you see I got. And in the wintertime, we get a lot of these types of skies. And shot this really tight, 400 mil. It may have been a little tighter than 400 mil because I had a 1.4 converter on my 400. And it was a 100 to 400 Sony. So what I wasn't planning on was over to the right, you can't see, there's a huge pile of rocks where these pelicans were coming in and out of and darting around in the scene. And I didn't place these pelicans here. There's no AI going on at all. And I just waited till that rotational light up on the lighthouse. I timed it out, how many seconds I had to count before it would come around. And then I just was going more off cue on that light on top of the light station. And I just would motored through it as fast as I could and came up with this image, which I really, really liked. I was very pleased with it. Another example of compression and using lines to direct your viewer's eye. This was all about this warm shaft of light. This was in Iceland, and that was hitting the top of this ridge. And it just happened to punch through the clouds for a short, brief period. And I was able to make this image with a telephoto. This was a 300 lens. Really liked it. I was shooting actually across a lake that was a glacier. And you can't see any of the glacier here because this light was trumping the glacier scene. Another one using compression, I plotted this on the photographer's ephemeris and knew that moon, if everything worked right, was going to be within my window of opportunity, which I explain in my 2 videos on plotting moons with the photographer's ephemeris. And this is Lone Peak in San Benito County in southern Santa Clara Valley. And just held my breath that I did my plotting right. And it's really exhilarating when you see the moon or the sun right where you thought it would be at right about the time you thought it would be. And then it was from there just very easy, click, 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 300 mil lens, and I had my shot. And this is one I captured just this past spring, just about, maybe just about a year ago up in the Eastern Sierra. They had the storm of the century, which was really of the last 50 years. And they had reported wind speeds of over 120 to 130 miles out on these peaks above Lone Pine. These peaks go up over 14,000 feet. So I waited till the afternoon light. I knew these peaks would be backlit. And I just took my long glass out, my 200 to 600, with my infrared camera, because I wanted to shoot this with dramatic Ansel Adams, kind of black and white. And just really loved the results. I got a lot of just beautiful images that I wouldn't have gotten if this wind wouldn't have been whipping the snow all around. So, just playing off the conditions, envisioning in your mind. And then I still take all the lenses and glass out. I never, ever, 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 ever leave anything back at the hotel. It's probably #1 mistake most of my workshop participants make. Even though we tell them, do not leave anything behind, they'll see something like this and I'll go, where's your long glass? I left it back at the hotel. I get it, they didn't want to lug it, but you can leave it in the car. Very simple. And that might be, let me see if I've got any more. Nope, that's the last one I've got for this show. So I hope this has inspired you guys. It was fun for me to go back and talk about a lot of these images. And I still probably use wide angle, I would say 70 to 80% of most of my landscape images, but you can certainly see, I think, through this, that there is a time and place to be using telephoto. So please don't be that one that leaves it back at the hotel. Throw it in your car, or if you're on a workshop, put it in your camera bag and put that in the car or whatever you're riding in and take it out, because you don't want to miss scenes like this. And it's, I can tell you from experience, it's not a lot of fun when you go, God, I left my telephoto. I needed that. So let's end on a happy note. I hope again to be doing these once a week. Please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, this is Don Smith. Get out there, stay creative, everyone. It's great for the soul. We'll see you next time.